With me today is David Gandy, founder of David Gandy Wellwear, and one of the world's most successful male models who's starred in huge campaigns and long-term relationships for fashion houses, including Dolce Gabbana and Marks and Spencer. Today, we're going to be delving into the leader behind the David Gandy brand and his journey from male model to clothing brand entrepreneur. David, first of all, welcome. Thanks so much for being with me. How are you? And let's talk about how the last couple of years have been for you to begin with.
Thanks, mate. Are we saying that we're cousins, by the way?
We can do. It's probably a surprise to most people, but why not? Yeah.
Yeah, Pete's my cousin. That's quite an odd thing, because actually this is going to be the first podcast I've ever done, first interview I've done, where the person's actually known me since, well, we've grown up together. So you know more about me than anyone ever would have in some ways. So you can keep those stories to yourself for a start.
Yeah, at least some of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. How's the last couple of years been? Because I think it's a question that we start every recording with, because everyone's had a unique experience.
Yeah.
It's been a pretty roller coaster for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. There's been a great amount of learns, but people have also had to do some significant life shifting during that time as well. Mm-hmm. And you were someone that we exchanged enough messages on it. Mm. Airport lounges and were your bread and butter for many years before the lockdown ensured. How's it been the last couple of years?
Odd, if I'm totally honest. We've had to adapt very quickly from a business point of view, but from a personal point of view as well. I feel a little bit guilty in the fact that actually during I call it the proper lockdown, and that sounds terrible. We've had so many lockdowns they completely confuse me, and I don't know quite what's happened over the last sort of couple of years. But so we were sort of 2022, 21, was it 2020 then? Was March that the March 2020? So yeah, that was, it was, but there was a time before that Brexit was really affecting the confidence in businesses, the confidence in brands, confidence in the fashion game. So we were sort of sailing through that okay. The influx of social media was affecting us quite a bit, if you're a traditional model in that sense. And then January hit, Brexit. Yeah, we Brexited, and everything was back to normal. The schedule where I was supposed to be gone from New York to Spain to back to New York, back to London to Moscow, all these sort of separate areas, and back to normality, as I call it. As you said, I live my life in an airport lounge, and then pandemic hit, and that was even more catastrophic for my business back then, as in my fashion sort of branding of David Gandy, as I call it, than anything to do with Brexit. Everything just stopped. We couldn't travel. No one was working. No one was doing anything. Magazines weren't shooting. And I had to adapt to that very quickly. So I quickly had to put out the back of my mind how much money was actually lost during those 3 months. There's nothing I could do about it. We just had to take, we've put enough sort of things in place, putting it in place to look after the cash and to that cash to work it, sort of work for me. And then I hate to say it, quite enjoyed my 3 months. And I went from being dragged from London by my other half, Steph, up to Lancashire, Yorkshire, to Steph going, we have to go home now. And I was quite happy in my wellies, working on the land, still keeping the businesses going. We're restructuring all the business, all the investments, but had to be dragged back to reality in many ways. And I still think there's a lot of people, if I'm totally frank, that haven't been dragged back to reality, and they've made the life decision that no, we don't want to go back, which is I respect. It's not something I can do, but yeah, they're continuing that, and I'm not. So, and during that time, as we all know, sort of started Wellwear, which is down to my MD, Charlie T, who called me, and over quite a few bottles of wine for quite a few many years, we've discussed it, starting my own label. And he gave me an ultimatum and said, we've got you here. It's now or never.
I think we've almost got to that point, but the David Gandy Wellwear brand, you have always been someone that I've been impressed by, because when you've built yourself up to become the place that you were at the time as the world's highest paid male model, it would be very easy just to go, right, I found my specialism here. This is what I'm going to do forever, and I'm going to be the very best self that I can be. And actually, a lot of people these days talk about doing just that, not trying to spread yourself too thin, or not trying to be good at everything you're bad at. Now, you have seemed to, from my eyes at least, always been interested in having a broad spectrum of business interests. And I wonder if you could talk through a little bit of the context putting around why that's always been the case. Because as I say, I don't think others in your position may have done the same.
No, but hard to, you sort of need to go back to, I suppose, where I wanted to position myself when I first started, which was 20 years ago. It took 6 years to get to where I was, to even get the foot in the door. And as I say, to get a foot in the door, it wasn't about getting a door open, it was more like sneaking in through a window and getting in that way. And then utilising that. And I could talk for ages about all the different scenarios I went on to get to in that place. And then once you're in that position, it wasn't sitting on your laurels and thinking, I couldn't. If someone told me, okay, Dolce Gabbana's the light blue campaign is going to go on until we're still doing it, and it's until 2022, 2020, but you don't know. You got a year's contract on that first one, so you think, what's happening after that year?
Yeah.
And then that year you get a 2-year contract, and then you hopefully negotiating up the money. And you think, what's going to happen after that 2 years? So I'll keep on going, I'll keep on going, I'll keep on pushing. Imposter syndrome, yes. Anxiety about where the next thing is going to come from. And it was always just setting myself up to be able to brand. And I saw this brand. I looked at the female supermodels, and this is what I always say. There was no male model that had done that, that had run it as a business. And I looked at it, and I looked at the female models, supermodels, and the Naomi Campbells, and the Chrissy Turntons, and the Kate Mosses, and they had these incredible teams around them. And there was strategy, and there was a name behind it. Now, everyone now is a brand because of social media. Everyone's got a name, everyone's a brand. It's much easier to do it. It's a lot harder back then. So that's how I had to develop that. And as I say, I got the platform from the women, and we went for it. So there was constantly pushing until I, in my head, always had a 5-year plan to know where I wanted to be. So, and every time I would ever say anything to people, some people work 300 and 365 days a year in the modeling industry, working for different brands every day. And in my head, and this sounds maybe a bit harsh, but I said, why would you want to work 300 days for that amount of money when you can get an exclusive contract and work 5 days a year for 3 times the money? In my logical head, and people say, yeah, but men can't do that. I said, why can't you do that? And why can't you have 3 of those contracts? And why can't you then expand? And then that's basically what I did. People told me no. Probably not the best thing to tell me no, because we're a bit like yourself.
Slightly hard-headed at times.
Yeah, I like to maybe prove that wrong. And that's pretty much what I did. It was a logical element of, the logical way of going, of running the business. And of course, that then, once you get that then gives you freedom.
Let's if you don't mind me jumping in there, because going against the curve, seeing things in a clear and quite obvious manner, it could be said.
Yeah.
It doesn't come often with people, and it often doesn't come very quickly. How long had you been in this industry to get to that realization point? Because one of the things that I've really enjoyed with the Stephen Bartlett's story is that, and a little bit people think way too much these days. When someone gets into the spotlight, has some success, they're like, oh, crikey, they must be new to the scene. Mm-hmm. And the reality is there's often been a lot of years of graft, labour, blood, sweat and tears that have gone into that. Mm. How long did it take you to realise that, no, I think there's a new way of doing things in the male industry at the time?
I think the first 5 years where I said, well, observation. Where do I fit into the industry? How do men fit into the industry? Why are the women getting that? What was the difference? Why do they have a name in the industry? Why do you know the Kate Moss and Naomi Campbell? How can you leverage that? Why is that worth so much more money? And it was a name. Doesn't make you a better model. Doesn't make you, I always say there's hundreds of other models out there in agencies that are better looking, better models than me. I just thought outside the box slightly to be able to have a name. So then brands want your name on their product because you bring engagement, you bring fans, you bring people that are following you as a brand already. Now that basically, in a basic form, is now what influencers and bloggers do to brands. They have a following, and that's what brands are buying, and that's what they were doing with me. But they were doing it 15 years ago, and that's what they were doing in Kate Moss. That you had a name, you got more press, you got more interviews. That's the way I looked at it, and it worked. It may not, we may be sitting here. I always think there's certain occasions. If I hadn't done that, and if I hadn't done that, so sliding door moments. They may never have, it may never have worked. but fortunate enough it did, and I never sat on my laurels, and we went from, right, then we want a book, and then we want our own underwear line, not my own underwear line, but did the underwear with Dolce. And then it was turning around saying, well, what if we do a collaboration? So other collaborations started coming in, and I was like, that's not right, don't like that. And then M&S came in, and we started working for 2 years together on Collezione. We turned that around, it was very successful, and we started talking about a collaboration. And we started talking about loungewear, which is now, every brand has loungewear, everyone knows what it is, everyone's been in it for the last 18 months, but at that time, loungewear wasn't a major byword for in fashion. It wasn't a category. You were probably talking about athleisure at the time. So we worked on the nightwear, the essentials, and the loungewear, and it did terribly well. But I always knew I wanted my own thing. There was a controlling I had with a collaboration, but there were many restrictions at the same time.
So let's talk about the timing of it then, because I like, it sounds like Charlie certainly knows you well as well in relation to this is the time. So has this been properly created in terms of the detail, properly been created since the lockdown began, March 2020? Or was it in...
So we finished the contract with M&S in January 9, 2019.
Okay.
So it wasn't a bad break. M&S were going in one way and I was going the other. And my brand at the time didn't fit where it probably would fit now to where M&S are going. But it was a frustrations probably from my end. I could see where M&S needed to go. I even, Steve Rowe, who's a good friend who I used to, we used to go out to dinners and drinks and talk about where I believe, and all these different things of bringing back St. Michael and selling third-party brands and closing down some of their stores and going more online are all things that I told them 5 years ago, and they've all brought in now. Now they couldn't have done it 5 years ago. That took, but since I've left, I've only seen all these things sort of start, and they were my frustrations. So I thought, I've got to do it now, and it was a massive risk. But we parted ways, and then we had I think sort of 6 to 9 months of a run out period of my stuff being in M&S. And as you said, Charlie probably knows very well. He knows everything that's going on. He started in a branding agency, and he said you would be our first client, our only client at that point. So all our
benefits and negatives to that.
Yeah. So he was starting as well. They're starting Canvas London. So we wear Canvas. So they were starting, and it was an incredible team of very experienced people within the fashion industry. And we sat around and said, okay, so how does this look now? What are we starting with? And of course, that had to be a continuation of M&S, but it had to be a different narrative. Because now, on that time that it took for M&S to sell that run-out period, the pandemic hit, everyone had done loungewear. Now there was too much loungewear everywhere. So how do we move that on? And that's where we started looking at the emotional durability of clothing, the scientific element. That's what I was looking at. We were like, why do you have that favorite bit of clothing?
Yeah.
Why do you keep it for so long? Why do you have that favorite pair of jeans? Why do we wear? What's the confidence in wearing that? And you slowly looked at that, and it's that sort of physical and emotional element to wearing that bit of clothing. Many studies done on it. Fascinating, actually, when you get there. I won't bore you with it, but it is about the confidence that stylish and comfortable clothing, more about the comfort of clothing gives you.
How's the journey for it been since the launch of David Gandy Wellwear? How's it been? How have numbers been? How's performance been? Because I think that's one of the very early fascinating areas. I remember being a startup ourselves in 2008 and thinking, right, how's this revenue projection going to work out then compared to, is it going to have any parallel and all the rest? It's great to hear that. And also kind of what that future looks like, because I'd imagine you would be well versed discussing and thinking about, is this what we're going to be famous for? Is it going to branch out after that? And what lessons do you think that you've learned from a multi clothing approach like an M&S offers compared to what you guys want to be about? Pretty sure that was about 85 questions.
There was. I was trying to think of the first one. One of the reasons I loved working with M&S, but one of the reasons I did work with M&S, and people say, why didn't you start your brand back in 2012, is the fact because I wasn't qualified. I didn't know how to run a brand. I didn't know how the clothing worked. I didn't know factories, designing, lead times, marketing. Of course, I did know that because I had my own brand. I wasn't qualified to do it. And everything I've tried to do on social and people following me is, the same thing where you say, well, you'll ask me about a suit and I will give you the 3 top tailors in the world and who I think is best. Because I've worn them, I've been there, I'm not been paid to work with Tom Sweeney or, Geeves or anyone else. I've never had a stylist in my life. What you see is I've styled myself. Sometimes I get it wrong, sometimes I get it right. Some people seem to like it and I've won style awards for it. Not quite sure why, but I have. So people appreciate it. And tailoring's been my passion. But, out of passion, away from that, from the suiting and every day, is essentials, is t-shirts, sweatshirts, denim, those sort of items, which is loungewear.
Yeah.
Which is what people don't see me in.
Of course.
But that's probably...
They only see the public perception, of course. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So could I make a suit? Absolutely not. Wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
I've been chalked so many times and I can adjust a cuff and tell them what to do. But it's that's why you have tailors. That's why you have cutters. And I could have a team that does that and I could spec a suit, spec a bespoke suit up. But it's not something I felt confidence in. But the confidence I'd had from those 5-6 years of being with M&S and learning that, I was like, I now think I am confident enough to go into launching my own line. Now, I'm not a designer, so we have a designer called Claire Stain, she's incredible. Production, factories, always different things. As a founder, I oversee every one of those as a creative director. So it's a creative director founder role. The artistry I quite like. Design to me is design. And I break it down as, do I like something the way it looks? And that goes for cars, houses, clothing, the whole thing. And that's what we try to achieve. But it's, again, saying that, how do we make it different? And it was bringing the wellness and apparel in for the first time. Now, there are companies that have done this. It's more in sort of gym or athletic wear. But if you actually break it down, I thought, well, you go to the gym for an hour a day and you have... you can get these antibacterial materials and these great breathing properties and everything else. But what about the rest of your clothing that you wear for the rest of the 23 hours a day? Why can't we bring that into it? So we started looking into it, and that's where we came up with the Wellwear Care, which is the aloe vera, which is the anti-inflammatory moisturizing for your skin. And that's when then we looked at the Wellwear Breathe, which is the antibacterial, anti-odor. And then, of course, you've got to talk about sustainability, which we have to look at, find the factories that are sustainable or putting sustainable matters about to produce the clothing, because fashion is horrendous for the environment, or fashion, sort of production.
Mass production,
and you've got the whole world buying fast fashion. And we need to change the educational narrative of people buying a £6 t-shirt or a £10 dress and thinking that's okay. Yes, it's affordable, and I understand why some people have to do it because they can't afford much else. But for the rest of us, we should not be doing that. From a business point of view, from a business model point of view, and when we circled everything that we needed to be, who we need to compete with, and everything we wanted the Wellwear to stand for, which was quality, sustainability, longevity, wellness. But if you looked at that probably now, and anyone did and went, well, you won't be able to do that for the money you're selling it. It's the easiest thing is we should have made it from 50% polyester, not worried about sustainability, priced it high, discounted it high, and it would be flying out the window, and it would do very well because it was cheap, because it's so cheap.
Yep.
That is the idea. But we've all got to have some responsibility nowadays, and that's what I wanted to do. So, and when you talk about the expensive suits, yes, I have expensive suits. Yes, I have expensive items. I'll be wearing, as probably not example today, but I've got a 5-year-old Dolce jacket on. I'll wear a suit, and someone goes, lovely suit. How much was that? And I won't say how much it is, but it's an expensive suit. But I've been wearing it for 11 years.
Yeah.
So my way of looking at it with sustainability is making something that is longevity. You can wash many, many times, it still holds its shape, its quality. You keep it for many years. You may pass it down to someone, you may pass it on to someone, you may give it to a charity shop. It's within, and then that person can buy that and they don't have to buy something else that's in production. As I said, the easiest model is to make stuff from 50% polyester, which is very cheap. I don't worry about sustainability. I don't worry about biodegradability. I don't worry about anything. I just worry about my end line. Now, fortunate enough, people have resonated with this, and I think that's why we thought it was a good time to do it, because people now, especially the younger generation, are understanding more about the emphasis on environment.
And you've gone from working for some of industry, you mentioned Stephen Rowe before, you worked with Dolce Gabbana for years. You've gone from working with some of the top people in the global industry to now, and who are founders of their own brands themselves, whatever the case may be, to now being, although it's founder and creative director and working with the managing director, you're the founder, and no doubt there's been some investment there as well. It is a whole different chair. It is a whole different experience in relation to turning up and doing a job and all the rest of it, and then off we go. You now know, of course, like you did before, the amount of work that goes behind the scenes. Talk to me about any of the big shocks that have come from being a founder. Talk me through the experience of that so far.
But we're from launch. We're October. We're 6 months in. I'm still learning. You know more than me. I should probably be interviewing you. I've never found a co. Within my brand, as I call it, the David Gandy brand, is I've had agencies and PRs, and I've employed other people to come on, but I've everything has been down to me in many ways, and there's been a lot of sort of delegation to PR, but that's their speciality, and founders completely different. And if I'm totally honest, if someone says, I'd love to come and I would love to found my own clothing brand, I would tell them to think twice about it. I was like, just, maybe you should just go on the collaboration route like I did with M&S. It's a lot, it's a fascinating process. It's the team. So actually coming from here, we've just been in a day of interviews for positions all day. So we're building. Doesn't mean, we're a team of 8 now. I went from a team of canvases 3, we were 4, then we were 5, then we were 6, and now we're 8, and we're employing a couple more people. It's not a massive company. So around that time, we had good investment, not massive investment, because in the UK, people don't invest in seed, by the way. It's very, very, very difficult. The team there at Canvas now, they all have a part of the pie. They all have a part of the company. They all have an investment in it, and a physical investor, like a financial investment in the company, which I believe is very important when you're founding a company, for those people to come on and have that work ethic to own part of the company. And that team we have there, and we have our roles: marketing, creative, founder, MD, designer. But we could name all like 4 roles each within that.
Yeah.
And if you send an email to Wellwear or to the group chat or anything at 6:30 in the morning, you'll probably get 3 replies from those 8 people. And if you do it at midnight, you'll probably get 3 replies from those people, from one of us taking care of something else, while someone else is. Now that's mostly, as you know, having kids. You're always awake. So if you've got your mobile phone,
I would say it gets better.
You oversee, yes. When's it get better? Because I'm not quite sure. But to be able to multitask like that is phenomenal for everyone. And for me to say I've got those people behind me, and it's been a phenomenal journey with those with those people so far, and to ask them to have to do that and I haven't asked them to do it. They've taken it on themselves, and it's a real everyone's got each other's back in the company as well. As a founder role from that, whether that had much to do with me or not, is I couldn't have asked anything of anyone else, and I don't have to ask anything. From that point of being, if everyone has an off day or an off week or someone doesn't do, it's my idea to go in, listen to people, and then go and sort it out. There's no negativity. There's no, everyone has off weeks, off day, an off day, everything else. I know I do. We all come in different moods some days. And talking about an investor meeting, I sat down with my MD, and it was quite a funny story. And I said to him, right, we're not losing on this Zoom call. Yes, we don't agree with what they've done. Yes, they are trying to like virtually financial ruin us here. Once we're going, we'll survive it. But you know, you attract more bees with honey. So it's about being positivity. 2 minutes into the meeting, I lost it. Absolutely
This is the game
lost
plan.
it. Yeah. And I just saw it, and it was the pent-up, and I'm not proud of losing it at that point. There was a lot of emotions going on, and actually afterwards he called me and went, "Well done for keeping calm. That was quite a sight." And I felt actually let down myself, and I was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. But there was a point that I didn't agree with what was going on, and it was silly. But that's about the only time. As we were saying before we were on camera, both of us have had to learn to basically be a bit more patient in this world. Growing up together, we both know that we've.
Well, we've both got fathers that are not famous for their patience, but like, and we may have inherited that from them. Yeah. But it's one of the topics that I've found various methodologies. Probably only because I've only been as a CEO for the business. We were, when you said that there, it really struck a chord. The three of us who found it in 2008 for 12 years, and it had gone okay during that time. We hit the FT top 1,000 fastest growing. We hit the Sunday Times fast track. We were doing all right. But the problem with that, and this is like one of the greatest learns in the last however many years, it's 14 years, there's chapters of a business, and what worked incredibly well for one period of time, you're going to have a blank piece of paper and look at it with fresh eyes again, which was why the lockdown for us from a business perspective was so phenomenal, because it forced you to go, what do you like about what you've got? What do you not like? And what you can do better? And for years and years, we'd had a similar thing. Email would come in at 6 or 12, and you might have been mid-reply before you saw that, from Michael Glenn, they've had one that's dropped in the inbox, they've done it already. And although people loved that because it showed that we all cared, the reality was over time, as scaling happened, it became less and less inefficient. And actually people were less and less clear on, who owns what? And the kind of things that I've always been, as you'll know, for me as a character, I like keeping things simple. I'm not a big fan of process, spreadsheets. I like being, the world is a people business, right? It doesn't matter what sector you're in, it's about people. And the reality has been, we've actually been forced, because otherwise it just means that people are unclear, uncertain, and it muddies the waters of who's responsible for what. What are the reporting lines? What's your actual job to do in relation to your role? If things aren't going right, who do you speak to, but who you're ultimately accountable to? And only in an exercise in the last few months, we've hired our first ever director of people and culture, because we realised that we might have been doing this to a degree so far, but we're not educated in it. We left our only place of employment after 3.5 years of being in the commercial world. Idiots. And one of the things that I loved about a Harvard Business Review article that I read a few months ago was that actually the optimum time for an entrepreneur is between 45 and 55. Because one of the things I've always detested, I'm clinging on desperately to my 30s, but the reality is that they all the analysis they've done, they showed that you have the most amount of experience, contacts, energy, and all the good stuff combined when you hit that zone. Now, one of the things that you've spoken about, and I love the fact you've spoken about it, because hopefully if people hear about David Gandy speaking about bloody imposter syndrome, and I wasn't sure I was right for it, they can see that it's an authentic thing where it feels uncomfortable. And the reality is it's taken you up to the point you are now, maybe slightly north, just slightly north of me. You still had the imposter syndrome when you started the brand, and it was not forced upon you, but you were like, yeah, you're probably right, and Shoshana, this is probably as good a time as any. Tell me the role that it plays now in relation to how you're going to go about building that business, because I wonder if there are methodologies that you use. And I know that you've mentioned to me over the years, you have friends that work in a city. You've got friends that do very, very different jobs, are completely out their jobs. And I think we share that. I think we've always had a core friendship group that are actually incredibly diverse. And from diversity comes great appreciation of different perspectives and different looks on things. What has it been about this time that has made it the right time for you to do that?
But I think it's having the confidence in myself through that working through of M&S, of having that confidence now to do it. And the objective was always to, I'm never like on anything, I don't think I have a fakeness. Obviously kind of what you see is what you get. pretty easy on
authenticity is the
well,
word.
the authenticity,
and it comes up time and time again.
There's an idea there's an authenticity, and the world we're living at the moment on social is not authentic. I'm an advocate for social. We sell direct to consumer, so we're using it, of course, but I see the dangers of it, and that's having accounts of my own that I see how many people fake these accounts, how many people approach, how many people are frauded by people. Very easily done. That's a whole different podcast, but I guess it is that authenticity behind it, and that's why I thought I would never have started it until that point, until I had that. Now the imposter syndrome, I don't think that will ever go away. There's an imposter syndrome that I don't mind the imposter syndrome. There's an imposter syndrome that makes you work harder.
Yeah.
There's a doubt in your head that just pushes you beyond. I'm not in competition with anyone. The only person I'm in competition is with my own head.
Yep.
That's basically it.
Yeah.
And that's what people can't understand. I always say people can't criticize you as much as I criticize myself.
Yeah.
Will that ever go away? No, because there's always that imposter syndrome that tells you you're not going to make it. It's going to go away. Should you have your own company? We have phenomenal results from October until the end of Christmas. We did very, very well. We were up, on not our targets, but other companies' targets. We launched, we were up like 400%, 500%. Now,
not the worst place to be.
No, it was fine. But I was saying, but I want to know why. And there are reasons. People resonated with the brand. We had good communications, good target marketing. It was good organic, good PR. The team did a phenomenal job. But I was trying to make excuses of almost, why has this gone this well up to this point? And I even said to the team before, we are going to have results that are not going to carry on, because we are starting on virtually the week before Black Friday. We then got the run up till Christmas. Now, this is people's goal period in fashion where most people make.
That 3 months.
3 months is, and I know this from investing in the London Stock Co and other companies, that those 3 months is pretty much 75, sometimes 75% of their income. So when it came to January, February, and you look at your model, which we got probably slightly wrong, is that, yes, we didn't think it was going to be as strong as December, but we didn't probably know it was, and actually January in the end that turned out to be very well, because we had to adapt very quickly. Now, going in the future, we know we need newness. Newness is about everything now. It's not about having seasons, it's about bringing newness. And we brought newness in a little bit late in February, so February's not going to be as good, so we're bringing it in. Again, we're 6 months old, we'll do that. And then hopefully the model will make sort of more sense. But these are all things you have to find out and no one ever tells you about. No one tells that when I'm modelling a pair of white pants in Dolce that they'll sell in December, they won't sell in January. Nothing to do with me. I don't have to worry about that.
Yep.
And I did have to worry about that. I didn't have to worry about that in M&S. Now, in many ways, but I did. And probably that's where sometimes me and M&S clashed, because they wanted a collaborative face of not really probably saying much. And I was involved in every part of it, like I am with Wellwear. But of course, with Dolce & Gabbana, I've worked for so many years, and I still work with Domenico and Stefano. I still personally talk to them. I saw a brand that, even after all those years, 25 years since I've been with them, they are still part of even the people on the front row. It's not done by a team on the shows, it's still approved by them. So imagine everything they've got going. And then when, I always give the example of Domenico, is they finish that men's show, you go behind and you watch it with the team, they bring it, which is lovely. None of the models, I was in there, and the Dolce & Gabbana team go and watch the show afterwards. And at that minute, Domenico doesn't go off and celebrate. He goes on and goes, right, women's next month or something next month.
Yep.
He goes home and starts it.
Yep.
He's already on it. And in fashion, I'm already working on October launch.
Yep.
Up to that point now, there are different things that are going to move, and other opportunities we're working on at the moment for summer and all these different things. But that's where we are. We have to work so far in advance.
I think it's probably one of the only sectors where strategic thinking is par for the course. Whereas a lot of businesses, when you begin something, you're like, here and now, bring revenue in. And that's all you think about. Whereas you guys have naturally got to be thinking 3, 6, 12 months ahead of how we're lining up the diary to make sure, and that's not something that...
We've got to think where people... What are we doing now? So we're coming out of pandemic, so people, yes, are being allowed, the way they're dressing. Can we help them the way they're dressing? they're not going to be dressing in this formal way they were before, and they're not going to be in lounge. Now, we are an essentials brand, a lifestyle brand. That's what we call each other. So I want to, what I say is I want to get to the bit where there will be a part of Wellwear, not full outfit, but a part of your outfit on every outfit that you're in. Steve Rowe, looking after M&S, if you actually look where M&S are doing now with the food, they're doing very well. They've incorporated TikTok. Apparently that is turning around their
Is that right?
their clothing consumer brands. That's got better. Their design's got better. To turn that around is phenomenal. And Steve Rowe is very different. He's to the way that Dolce Gabbana run it, much bigger, sort of so many more shops, and it's high street. It's vastly, vastly different to Dolce Gabbana. And Steve is a person that I learned a lot of as well, of going, right, anything that happens, anything you don't not like or don't agree with, come and see me. Now, he might tell me to fuck off at one point and go, no, I don't agree with that. I think my team's like, he might go, thank you for telling me, let me go and sort it.
Yeah.
And he'll get
involved. Or at least have a
involved.
Conversation about it.
We'll have a conversation about it. Let's go and have a beer about it.
But that's a relationship related thing again, isn't
And that's it. And that's the CEO of M&S, is he, well, chief executive of M&S. I'm model for one of his brands.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to listen to me. I don't have to walk in and he said, come and see me. And I learned something from that as well.
Yeah.
So there's been that open part of, I always want someone to be able to come and tell me things. And believe me, they do, in the team that I'm in, to be able to tell me briefly that, no, I don't think we're going down this journey. If I believe in something so right, and I've done it so many times before, I believe in this is right, and we'll continue it. So just trust me. But what I try and do in anything, and I did it with M&S and I did it with this, is it's my decision.
Yep.
No one is getting the blame for anything. I love trying things. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I haven't lost anything. So it was my decision to make that in the end.
David, a couple of things that you've mentioned is that you've been working within your sector and industry for a really good amount of time now to at least get to the point where the confidence is just about enough to be able to start your own brand. You've worked with world famous names like Dolce Gabbana, the team at M&S. There's obviously historical figures as well that you've made public comment about before that you take great inspiration from when it comes down to leadership. I'd be really interested to know who are the leaders that you've worked with before, that you've taken some long-lasting learns from, and then once we've gone through that, it'll be interesting to hear how you go about now as a founder, just 6 months into a business, which is so early on, how you go about making sure that you're going to continue that development.
Yeah. We've mentioned Steve Rowe, Dolce Gabbana. Tandy Jansen, you won't know her name. She's the founder, owner, still is, of Select Model Agency, who I've been with for the whole of my career. She's owns a men's agency. She started with a women's, saw the gap of the men's side in male modelling. Probably a good team now of 20, 25, a sort of a board of the top 200 models in the world. She is still one of my biggest inspirations. And if there was anyone from a black woman in probably a men's owned industry, now fashion is very much dominated by women, but to own the agencies is dominated by men. And if there was anyone to say, well, I might have been restricted from race, being black, being a woman, everything, never heard it. Never heard anything complaints. She is a force to be reckoned with. And she has always thought outside the box. Now, she has 20 of the most crazy ideas you'll ever hear in your life. 5 of them will work. But those 5 of them are absolute genius. And that's what I've learned from as well. And it was weird that we were talking to her, that we were having a bit of a team meeting before this, and actually we were interviewing people, and I said, there is no wrong with any idea that you come up with. I love ideas. I love trying to push the boundaries. That's what I want. I want people to be proactive. And that's the difference at Select Model Agency. They were proactive. They went out to get the business. They didn't sit there on their phones and phone their models up and wait for the brands. And Tanya's still working on that, and we still work on those strategies today. She was the one, and I've said a million times before, when everyone said, you'll definitely work for Ralph or Armani. They kept saying that. She went, you're Dolce Gabbana. And I was like, but everyone's saying I should be Ralph Armani, you're Dolce Gabbana. And she used to say that. And she was the one that I went to after 5 years and said, Tanya, I've had enough. I don't want to do the catalogue work anymore. And she would, you're in a great position. You're the envy of so many guys in here from your reliability of work. And I said, don't like it. I'm not leaving a legacy. I want to create something, and I'm not working with the best in the world. And she went, fine. So pretty much tomorrow, if this is the way you want to do it, we cancel everything and we restructure you, we rebrand you in the industry. And that's what she did. And I had to take, I had to trust in her that she knew what she was doing. And I think that's it at the end of the day, that what I took from that is that her team there, and the same as me, and I still do to this day, is when she says something, now she and I might go, I think we need to do this. And she go, well, let's try it, David, that's fine. And she listens to me. She's a great listener. There is a point when she says, no, this is the way we're going. No one argue. We're going down this route because I know hopefully it's the best friend. She takes on herself.
Listens to everything.
Listens to everything.
Makes a call.
Calculates everything. It's great, but even if it's in my heart or in my belly or I've been here before, we are doing this. And this is the way we're going forward.
One of the questions we often ask at the end is, what does great leadership look like? And I think that might be about it.
Yeah.
Listening to a load of people, allowing for creativity, allowing for freedom, and then saying, actually, well, this is my role. I'm gonna make the call here, and it'll be right sometimes.
Yeah, I think I've learned I don't want to micromanage anyone. I hopefully you employ the people that you know will make that. And what I say to people, and I said everyone in the team today, and I said in the interviews, I said there is nothing wrong with failure. Now this is quite a famous thing now, people. There's nothing wrong with failure. It's been said for years, but there isn't. You learn so much from it. You learn from failure. The hard bit about it is you have to get up and carry on, and you have to take that. And you can talk about in a box analogy. If you think what a great fight, but actually some of the greatest fights you ever watch is if someone's been knocked down and they get up and they win. It's getting that mental factor of getting up and getting on and moving on, and just in taking that a big punch and going, doesn't matter. I'm still on the right avenue. I still believe in this. Let's punch on through.
They used to call it character.
Every young person's got the idea is they're walking in to the CEO position.
Yep.
They don't want to work. I said, you go and work for a company. I said, if they tell you that you're going to be there for 9, you get there at 8:30. If they tell you can leave at 6, you leave at 7:30. You go and get the coffees. You look at everyone and go, what do you need? What do you need? You have to think 5 steps ahead of what that person needs. It's called working at the bottom and working to your top. And I know you'll have the education, everything, but it means diddly squat at a certain point.
Yep.
You have to prove yourself to that. And that's what we've all had to do. It's called grafting. It's called hard work. I like taking risks. Always. I've never seen it like that, but I always have. So there's that risk and reward. And something comes without taking that risk, and you get a reward from it. Sometimes there's something I question about it. So I do like taking risks. It's not for everyone, and that's the thing. And if you've got your calculations right and you think in your heart that you know you're right, generally I've done quite well with it, but it is taking those risks. Now you've got to give that confidence to your team. You say, take the risks. Take the risk. Here's the budget. If you believe in it, believe in it. Fails, it fails. Who cares? We've tried it. We've tried to go on. We've tried to give the confidence. That was my biggest problem with anything when I was working for other brands. I was like, here's an idea. And they were like, woof, it's a big risk, that one. I said, but it's not damaging the brand. It's a risk, yes. And they would never do it. Never do it. Now we have the opportunity to do it. And I probably might not be so brave now, actually, now that it's my out of our investment, out of our budget. But I am, and I'm saying to the team, yeah, let's try it. Let's go on that sort of avenue. And I think that's the difference, is to bring some of my ethos of what I've done, is putting it into them and saying, try it. I don't want to be the person that says no at the end of the day, because I've been dealing with those people for so long and saying, yeah, nice idea, but that's not. My idea isn't that. It is to say, right, well, let's go with it. I trust you. You're in that job. You're in your communications, your social, your marketing. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's where I've taken. But as I said, I've been founder for 6 months. I'm learning on the job, and it's I've never had to deal with so many individuals and people. Larry King, who I've invested in, who's he came and started. Doing my hair and being on sets, and he's the same. When with Larry, I was like, well, Larry, you cut everyone's hair, but you're not on set, so you don't get credited. So come on sets, come on M&S, come on Dolce, come and do the covers. Then started doing it for everyone else. You know, he's flying all over the world at the moment, going to Oscars, to BAFTAs, to everything else. And then once he started building his portfolio, I said, where do you want to go? So I want to build my own salon. So I was like, okay. So we got a consortium together in salons, and now he's flown. But, and I won't mention the company he worked with before, but what I learned from there is what they wanted to do was restrict him. So when he said, I want to go off and start my own salon, they try to put as many barriers in the way for him to do that. And I thought, and I have spoken out about it, and I thought, what a terrible thing to do. The clever thing for me, I would have thought, for when they've got that money, they've got that brand, is to go, yes, we will fund you to do that.
Back the venture.
Yeah, it'll be your
Empower
name, but so own part of it, empower it and do it. But they try to stop everything. They try to stop staff going. They try to stop him opening. You know, which is their biggest enemy, and it's to me, it's pathetic in that world to be like that. To be honest, so I've learned. I've seen also other ways of not running companies, not being, like I say, founders,
not how
restricting.
You want to be.
No, absolutely not how to be. Is one of the things you really, really have to look at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So let's talk about it. Has there been any one biggest shock since you've been founded so far? And after that, the biggest challenge right here and now that you're facing for the future?
I'm trying to think of a big shock to that. I think the naivety of investors, and I'm not talking the investors who invested, because we've got some incredible investors and foresight, and they've really let us actually fly and really have not constrained us in any way. But I think that was because I've invested in brands myself, and I'm a big believer. When you actually, we had sort of going back to retrospective results of M&S, the experience of me, the results of 15 years working with Dolce Gabbana, the biggest friend, the Jaguar, and all these different. You can put it in front of people and go, "That's our experience, and here's the team we have." To me, there wasn't a way of this going wrong in that respect, and still they were like, not really right for our model. And then actually, there's a couple of people approached and said, right, actually, here's what we've done now in the last 5 months. Oh yeah, you're a bit big now for our, I was just like, yeah, you're a bit big for our model now. So I was too small now and too big. I was like, this is where we are going wrong. I think that was the biggest shock of actually people willing to take the risk on a company that it was definitely nothing's a sure thing, but we couldn't have built people would looked at our IM and we had experienced people saying this is one of the best we've ever seen. And that's thanks to Charlie T, really, the MD. And I think that was probably the biggest shock, is that negativity still. I think America might have been a lot easier.
You're famously, at least in the family, of self-deprecating in relation to the success you've had. And I was wondering if there was a point with David Gandy Wellwear that you allow yourself a mini pat on the back before going on. Like, I have been incredibly frustrated that it's taken us too long to get to 200 heads, and you bet your bottom dollar on making sure that we do the next 200 heads to get to 400 plus far quicker than it's taken us up to this point. Will there be any points for yourself that you've highlighted that you'll actually allow yourself a little glass of something decent and go, no, we've done all right?
There's always time for a glass of something decent. That's entirely different. No, I don't think I've ever. I don't very rarely look back if I've criticised myself for doing that, because I never have actually celebrated that time and that place, because I'm so worried about the next step. I've never enjoyed that moment. Sometimes I'm like, well, where are we going? What are we doing? And I suppose there is a time. Again with this, I mean, I'll be totally honest. We sat down and had the fulfillment company, the digital company we used. We actually sat down with the figures the other day, properly for the first time in a meeting it was probably 4 or 5 hours. And actually the figures, I'll be totally honest, I knew roughly in my head of getting the figures from the team what we were doing. It was better than I actually realised. And I was like, so that's okay. But of course my mind went then to something going, right, well actually why then has this happened, that happened, and we're off. So yes, we've done okay, but we're certainly not. No, I can't be. It's just not something in my head to celebrate it for some reason. The goalposts have moved. I'm in a nice position where, before there was a thing where I didn't have anything. When you don't have any money, there's no risk.
Yeah.
What are you going to risk it for?
Yeah.
You know, there were people asking me, I said, well, I just walked into that casting, or I just did this, and I did that. Well, why wouldn't I? I had to get my foot in that door, and I had nothing to risk. When you have money, you have a nice house, and then you go on nice holidays, and everything starts getting, you then have something to risk. Now, if you're on your own and you lose everything, you're on your own. But when you have a family, again, they need education, they need nice, they're in houses, they need clothes and everything else. It starts putting a risk in your head of calculating, actually, do I need that risk versus reward thing? But you make all these calculations. How much can I lose there? How much can I invest to lose if that does well? And now I can think something I would say I'm not bad at is actually I can see the overall something of this move, and that move will lead to this.
I was going to ask you that, how you're able to think about what's coming ahead, what things you've got to think about, how it's going to influence the future as well. But one of the things that I also know that I've only started benefiting from the last 9 months is getting outside of industry in experience, expertise, and often thought provocation through different questions. It's been a methodology that I'm devastated took me as long to learn. But now that I'm there, I'll definitely never be going back through a combination of mentoring, executive coaches, but also just chatting to well-positioned people in industries completely unrelated to yourselves. You mentioned that you've got pretty good at it now yourself, but do you make sure there's time set aside, be it weekly or monthly, to make sure you chat to friends and family that have been on interesting journeys and do interesting things to help your decisions?
Yeah, but I mean, definitely they're the people that intrigued me the most of how people have got to certain success is different to different people.
Absolutely.
And it's, people interest me as, I was going back to the Steve Bonnet thing. Are you happy? And of course I am happy, but there's a way I had to think about it. Now, could I be happier? Could my family be happier? Could other people be happy? And that's I mean, one thing at the end of the day is that, where I want this team around Wellwear is constant positivity and happiness. That's what I want in a workplace at the end of the day. And to have, to have these conversations with people, how they've achieved that might have been, I've completely left it behind. Went to go and live in a, forest somewhere and without phone, without anything else, or how do they, but I think like yourself and like me, we don't stop. Now that's something we've got to think about because of having families. And now we are, we are contactable 25 hours a day, 24, it feels like 24 hours a day, and it's pretty much. Now I always sort of make sure there are times on the weekend when I have sort of, when Steph's with the baby now, Matilda, it's just me and Matilda, and I have the phone, but I don't get it out. And we go swimming, and we go into the woods, and we go and feed the ducks, and we do all these different, take Dora for a walk, and all these different things. I'm not on my phone, I'm not looking at it. It is such an easy thing to get into that rat hole of just, I'm just doing that, darling, and then before you know it, you're like, wow, what's just happened in the last 5 minutes?
Yeah. Is
to have that, and then that's something you have to learn. So I think it's the way people, yes, they've had success in the business, but there's that, how they had, that success within their business, but how they also kept that happiness and that, the equal happiness between family and success and business at the same time.
I had someone pretty close to me describe it as the circle the other month that talked about you've only got a finite amount of energy. And if you want your relationship with your children, your wife, your friends, your family, working life, and your hobbies, and anything else in between, if you want that to be good, then you can't expect to be able to do it if you've got no energy. And it really struck a chord with me.
Yep.
She drew a big circle and said, there's 100% of energy, where are you going to use it? And I definitely found that about a month or two after starting this job, I was incredibly self-frustrated and irritated the fact that I knew I wasn't doing the job well. I knew I didn't know it yet. And why was I expecting to know it well? I mean, that's a whole different question. But the reality was I was like, oh, I'm getting really frustrated and really angry here. And I know that I wasn't as good a dad as I could have been, as good a husband I could have been. I was like, right, something's got to change. And that conversation with someone to go, no, this is how you might want to think about it, because it's really changed things. And actually working with my assistant, Adele, the reality has been when we sit down at the beginning of each week and go, how's the circle looking? That means time, one-on-one time with my wife, quality time with children, and making sure, especially where we've got some exceptional people doing great things, gallivanting and celebrating those successes. Yeah, I've been pretty good at it over the years. But the reality is if you do that 2-3 times a week and then get home, all you want to do at the weekend is not do much. And I was like, no, that's not right. So what am I going to do to make sure I do have the energy for this at the weekend? And actually, I couldn't agree with that statement you said there anymore.
Yeah.
If you know that your circle, that balance you've got in every aspect of your life, that is where I think that famous question that you said you got asked, if you're happy with how that balance is, yeah, I reckon you're happy.
Yeah.
Could it be a bit better here, a bit better? Yeah, but generally, are you happy that all the important aspects? And I do believe you can have it all. I do believe you can have it all, but I don't believe it can come without considerable planning, because otherwise you get down that rabbit hole that you said, and all of a sudden you're in a startup business that just requires every ounce of you. And you think, I haven't taken swimming for a week or two. And I'm like, that's an important part of me. So that sitting back and stepping back and planning, I was terrible at for a lot of years, but I definitely feel like I'm getting better at it now, even if it's a constant work.
I think that is so, is it Danielle who was arranging this earlier? So, she's been brilliant communicating with me. She obviously works for you. She knows probably I've got a million things on. You've got a million things on. She took control of the whole situation. It's getting us together, seeing it here. And I said to her today, I said, Danielle, everything confirmed today, just confirming 3 o'clock. She went, yes. So it's this address. It's opposite here in the introduction. Here's a picture of the street with an X on it. And I love that. And I literally said to my team Friday, I was like, if I could, this Danielle, who is Pete's, I said, I might try and grab her because she's just absolutely great. And I have that in the team. Charlie T and me, we're very, and I'm like, if you've done it, he said, yeah, already done that. I said, have you thought about doing it? And he said, yeah, I did that. And I'm the same for him. So we're working very closely. He's the MD, I'm founder. We're working so closely on everything. And we're both thinking 3 steps ahead of probably ourselves and everyone else that they've done. Everyone's doing that at team. Is the same thing. She's like, I've done this interview, but it's an email questionnaire for journalists. So I know what you're going to answer here because I've taken it off of these, but these are personal, so you do it, so I've saved you time. Though it's those people that allow you to go home an hour earlier to go with the kids. The beginning of a company is basically your problem solvers. You cannot accept that there are going to be all these problems. And I said it to Charlie, and Charlie is my absolute confidant in the company. Of even it's been a couple of times, before Christmas, and I went, right, give it to me straight, and he was like, yeah, not good, blah blah blah, and I went, okay, but none of the rest of the crew, none of the rest of the team knew it. Right, let me solve it. Basically, and then when Charlie said, we don't mind problems because we'll solve them. That's what we've been doing, and that's what we'll continue to do until you've got enough staff and enough of the team to be able to plan and enjoy it a bit more. Going back to what we were saying about happiness and that family, and you've got to balance that. I can't remember what it was, but there was a podcast interview the other day, and he said, and this will resonate with you, and he said, your mum and dad's still alive? And he said, yeah. And he said, how often do you see them? He said, probably Christmas and a birthday. So he said, twice a year. He was like, okay. So he said, how old are they? He said, 75. So he said, probably on average, they'll live until they're 80.
Yeah.
And he went, that's an age. Hopefully longer, could be less. And he said, so I'm going to tell you, you get to see your parents for 10 more times in their whole life. And the guy went, now you've put it like that, I've got to go and see my mum. And he said, yeah, that's...
Comes back to the circle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that, I've always made sure, and we've always made sure, we've been a bit crap at it over the last couple of years, but there's been problems, there's been elements of it. Yeah. But you've seen your mum, and I know that, and I've seen mum and dad, and I make sure we do that all the time. They come up, we go and see them. It's something I never wanted to ever have regrets. I never saw my mum and dad enough, or my children enough, or anything else. If that means that work takes a bit of a hit, I'm afraid that has to have a hit. That is the difference between having a family and building something, and then it was different when I was single, bachelor, everything else. That was different. But as I said before, it's going back to, and that means, as you said, that circle of, and that actually brings the happiness at the end of the day.
Totally, absolutely. It's something that I ask everyone at the end. It's a slightly more light-hearted way to end, because we've covered some excellent stuff today. And if you haven't come prepped for this particular question, David, I feel for you slightly, because there's probably a myriad of different things that I know that you've read and listened to and watched over the years. But I ask everyone, has there been a best book, movie? And I know you're on a lot of podcasts, so maybe we'll admit the podcast bit, other than this brilliant one, of course. Yeah. But the best book or movie that you've taken some long-lasting learns from, or just feel like there's been one or two core elements that have always sat with you?
There is a book called Unsung Hero. And it's about, and I completely forget his name, but he's an Irish explorer, and he was Shackleton's right-hand man. And it was basically that. He was the unsung hero. He was the person that he went on with his expedition with Shackleton, these horrendous times when they were in these expeditions and got iced in on their boats for 4 or 5 years, had to kill their dogs.
It's a hell of a tale.
Just, I can't even fathom why you'd want to do it, how you do it, how you have the mindset to do it. And he was the one that, out of virtually all of them, survived. But he was always the one that motivated everyone else, was never the person that everyone sort of kind of looked up to, or was the famous name behind it. But he was always the strength of that expedition or that group. That, for some reason, resonated with me. It's called SAS The Rogue Heroes, and it was how the SAS was started. And I suppose I like it because of the fact that none of them particularly were the best at what people thought they should be doing in their different regiments, their different parts of the Army, the Navy, the RAF. It was a guy, who got together, basically to cause absolute havoc behind enemy lines, and they had nothing to lose, and that's what they wanted to do. And Churchill loved it, because I know that Churchill loved these ideas, and he used to go around to all the different sort of, as I say, the Army and the Navy and everything else, and said, "Who's the guy that is good, but that doesn't fit in?"
Bit of a scally.
Yeah, and he said, "This guy, good." And I just love that story that the SAS was basically started from that, from those guys that didn't conform. That didn't do as they were told. Bit like where we were talking a bit like education school earlier, but
those guys,
they were the ones actually that were on top basically in the end, and just an incredible book. I do know that I think that it's been now made into a series or a movie by the Peaky Blinders director. And I've heard Tom Hardy involved. I mean, I may have invented that, because that's basically everything I want that book to be.
I've read the book.
Yeah.
I know it so well, and I hope all of what you've just said is true in relation to. Yeah, I was watching the latest Peaky Blinders Sunday night and thinking, I hope Tom Hardy's in this series, because he was just so good in that before. But yeah, an incredible book. I'm with you totally. Almost the misfits.
Yes.
Almost the people that were the naughty kids, but actually they disrupted things in a way that had phenomenal impact. And I think there's a great lesson in there. It's not always to be a sheep. It's to go against the tide. Disrupt. There's nothing wrong with disrupting. It's quite fun. As long as it's authentic.
Authentic disrupting. We've just invented a new category there.
David, it's been really, really great speaking through bits and pieces and the beginning of David Gandy Wellwear. I'm really looking forward to hearing and seeing how it goes from strength to strength, and I'm looking forward to the summer announcement enormously off the back of that earlier. I'm almost certain you didn't meant to mention that, but I'm looking forward to it now. I'm sure there's been lots that's resonated with listeners, and like me, they'll be taking away some valuable ideas and thought provocation. Thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please give a 5-star rating and share it with others in your network. Thanks again, David.
Thanks, Pete, mate.